especially those that have been traveling and are back. Jeff, Stephanie, Terry, glad to have y'all back safely. Mentioning that, though, we need to keep Trey and Frederick, thank you, in mind. They've traveled to Amarillo to be with Christina. We need to keep her father in our prayers and that family. Hadn't had any updates since they left to go out there to Amarillo, but things didn't sound too good. Brother Doug, you stepped in at the last minute. Are you feeling better? I hadn't talked to you this morning.
I can't hear you, Larry.
Okay. Are you feeling better?
A little bit, maybe.
A little bit, maybe. Okay. And keep the Fullers in our prayers. Rosie went through a all-day ordeal at the cardiologist the other day. Said it seemed like one of those days that every time you took one step forward, you'd take two back. She got there at 11 and didn't leave till 5. So that's a doctor's offices and hospitals are a hard place to sit in. Pardon? Dot has a Thursday appointment. Okay. Anybody else we've missed or overlooked? Okay. Brother Terry, you feel like leading us in a prayer, please?
Father, we are thankful for your day. Give us the opportunity that we might gather together. People, thankful for this time to be able to open up the Bible, read the scripture, pray that might be true for all the world. Thy word, all people are able to listen and obey. Father, for Larry, we pray for him and he set the truth, pray for the message that is there and also the message. Father, we truly thank you for the one who makes all this possible. Father, we are still mindful of those that are undergoing illness and continued problems. Thank you for progress on some and continue to pray for them that it will be in a better place. Father, we're grateful. Thankful that you would die in our place. We might be forgiven. Father, we're truly thankful that we have been Christ and hope of heaven one day. And Jesus we pray.
Amen. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Before we get started on this chapter, though, I want to talk about a subject called words. The English language is a mess because one word might have 12 to 15 different meanings. So words, we need to look at words not only as the word, but a word in context to see what it means. And I think you'll understand why I'm going there as we get into this chapter a little bit later. But as a for instance, when I was in Korea 30 odd years ago, one of the guys I ran around with by the name of Jack, he was an old country boy like me. And we loved to sort of needle our friends from the north, our city folks from the north. And we're sitting around the day room one day, and Jack looks up and says, well, I'm preparing to go eat. Anybody want to go with me? And of course, one of our northern eloquent friends spoke up and said, don't you mean preparing? And Jack said, well, said, I don't think so. Said, what does the word repairing mean? And our northern friend said, to fix. And Jack said, I used it just right then. I'm fixing to go eat. Anybody want to go with me? So, so words in context make a difference. And the reason I say that is when we start out here with the first comment, Paul says, am I not an apostle? Well, let's pause there for a minute. Because I know people today who say that they're apostles based on the religious group they're with. So let's look at the word apostle. In the strictest definition of the term, anyone who preaches or is sent to preach, could they not be called an apostle? Now, we don't use that term today because we don't want to confuse the world like some of the religious group that call themselves apostles. They take on a little bit higher meaning of the word, that they're inspired to go do this in a direct way. So we don't use that word in the church, but technically speaking, it could be used. Now, what is the difference between an apostle, which is a messenger or one sent, versus one of the apostles?
The apostles, they were with Jesus when he was on earth, or like Paul, they saw the risen Christ in person.
They had some parameters that they had to meet, that they were with him, witnessed, and carried on. And again, as we technically speak, there were only 12 of the apostles, those that were designated that. However, when we look at what we refer to as the Apostle Paul, he even calls himself born out of season. But if we go back into the book of Acts, wasn't he directly sent? Wasn't he chosen by God to be the messenger there? So again, in context, yes, sir. Yes, Saul even spoke to Christ. But that's the difference as we look at those words. So when Paul then here in this first question says, am I not an apostle? Well, he absolutely was. He was chosen by God to go spread this message, but he wasn't considered one of the 12 apostles. Does that make sense? Okay. Then this first verse also has 3 other questions. Am I not free? What does he mean by making that comment? Am I not free? He was a Roman citizen, and also as a Christian, aren't we all free in the Christian religion? And then he says, have I not seen Jesus? Well, Joel has already answered that question when he may have seen him on other occasions, but we know when he was on the road to Damascus that he had a direct conversation with Jesus. And then the 4th one there, are not ye my work in the Lord? What does he mean by that? Are ye not my work in the Lord? Aren't you the results of what I did here 4 or 5 years ago? And so those are the 4 questions in verse 1. He's an apostle. As a Christian, he's free. He has seen the Lord. And then he goes in this, his work. In a manner of speaking, metaphorically speaking, could we Christians not say that we have seen the Lord? Not visually, but by his work. Aren't we in tune with him? We've seen the results of his work, and by faith we're with him. But like I say, not visually. Okay. Verse 2, if I be not an apostle unto others, yet doubtless I am to you, for the seal of my apostleship are ye in the Lord. This is just restating again and confirming that with him being the messenger, him doing the preaching, the teaching, the missionary work that he was on, the church being established is evidence that he has done what he was sent to do. He asked it as a question in the first verse, but then in the 3rd verse he says, mine answer to them that do examine me is this. Those that question his apostleship or his position, he is going to now go into a list of how he's answering them. Have we not power to eat and to drink? Power there really means the right. Do we not have the right to do this? Have we not power or the right to lead about a sister, a wife, as well as other apostles, and as the brethren of the Lord and Cephas? Or I only and Barnabas, have not we power or right to forbear working and to do work? Questions or comments on any of the first 6? Yes, sir.
Paul mentions eating and drinking. Just technically it fall under the fact that he's supposed to be supported by people and therefore they can pay for what he eats and drinks. He's saying these are some of the things that are given, not necessarily that he's going to say, here, I haven't chosen that route, but I could do that.
Okay. What Brother Client said was the eating and drinking here, he is getting into a line of support. And the rest of the chapter, I go to this chapter when I meet people that think preachers shouldn't be paid. Because from here on, the rest of this chapter basically deals with preacher support, supporting missionaries and things of that nature. And I guess what Brother Client said there was just the introduction to it, just letting it jump off at that spot. Because in verse 7, he says, who goeth a warfare any time at his own charges, at his own expense? Who planteth a vineyard and eateth not of the fruit thereof? Or who feedeth a flock and eateth not of the milk of the flock? Say I these things as a man, or saith not the law the same also? Now that law would be the law of Moses. And just to sort of set the stage, in the law of Moses, how was what we term preacher today? Then they were called priests, those that ministered to the holy things. How were they treated versus other people? Weren't the priests fully taken care of? All of those that dealt with anything about the sanctuary, the temples, the altars, weren't they taken care of? So they didn't, even when they get into the promised land, they don't have a portion given to them because they get a portion from everybody. So even what he's referring to here is even in the Mosaical law, they took care of those that were the religious leaders. Brother Clunch, you look like you. Right. One reference there is even when they boil the meat, there's stick in and take out whatever hangs on to it. Verse 8 says, say I these things as a man, or saith, talking about the law of Moses, for it is written in the law of Moses, thou shalt not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treadeth out the corn, doth God take care for oxen? Or saith he it altogether for our sakes, no doubt, this is written, that he that ploweth should plow in hope, and that he that thresheth in hope should be partakers of his hope. Verse 11 is getting down to some keys. If we have sown unto you spiritual things, is it a great thing if we shall reap your carnal things? If you think about that for just a moment, what is the difference between a spiritual thing and a carnal thing? Spiritual is the religious, the salvation end of it, and carnal would be physical, daily food, etc. So in essence, if you spread the spiritual, aren't you, and you get a meal in return, aren't you giving more than you get? I mean, you're being satisfied for your daily needs, but what is more important, a daily need or an eternal need? So as he looks at it from that angle, we sow unto you spiritual things. We spend our time doing this. Shouldn't somebody try to take care of us? As Brother Clint said in Romans, it says that you're a debtor to do that. Verse 12 then says, if others be partakers of this power over you, are not we rather? Nevertheless, we have not used this power, but suffer all things lest we should hinder the gospel of Christ. Here is where Paul makes a statement that he has not and does not require them to do that. He worked at his other profession and did this. But what he's pointing out is that others have. You've fed others and you've taken care of others for doing this. Why are you not wanting to support us? But we don't require it. I'm going to do the work even if I have to pay for it. Learned a long, long time ago a saying that I think is absolutely appropriate, and that is, no matter what you pay a bad preacher, you have overpaid him. And no matter what you have paid a good preacher, you have underpaid him. So this comes up, it hadn't come up with me at least in many years. But we used to have some people at this congregation who thought that a preacher shouldn't be paid. And you go to these verses and, well, they only work an hour or two a week. Yeah. Walk in that preacher's footsteps with him. You're right. And they only work during school, yeah. Mm-hmm. But like I say, that hadn't come up in quite a bit of time. But these verses are lining everything up where, as Brother Clint said back in Romans, if someone spends their whole time, like Brother Clint, preaching, preparing to preach, taking care of the congregation, we owe it to them to take care of them. We are indebted to them for that. When it gets down to how much, again, that depends on congregations and sizes and what you can afford and everything. And generally speaking, you don't want the preacher to live a better standard than the rest of the congregation. You don't want to put him on such pedestal that you're paying him more than you can afford to pay, and them living in a lifestyle that exceeds the congregation. But at the same time, you don't want to be living at this level and have him down on the poverty level. So it's sort of a balancing act, affordability and things like that. But the main point is we're obligated to take care of those who put the Lord's work first and us first. Yes, sir. Now, I have been very, very fortunate in my dealings with various preachers over the years. I've been in a position even here to arrange for gospel meetings and paying and talking to them before they come and things like that. I have never had a preacher when they were invited to come and speak, I have never had one tell me what they wanted to get paid. because I would ask. And they would always have, in general, some phrase to the point of whatever you think I'm worth, or what you can afford, or just make sure I got gas money, or something like that. They never said because what is their interest? A good preacher is always underpaid, but a good preacher is always more interested in spreading the word and doing it from the heart than he is what he's going to get back. Brother Clunch, I'm stepping into your territory big time, but
He went to a small congregation, he went to the congregation and they said, okay, you know that we're small, we need half of the contribution. That wound up changing a little down the road because somebody converted and the congregation grew so much that sort of backfired on them because the way they worded it.
yes, sir. I'm sure he was amiable to the reduction in percentage, though, wasn't he? So Paul's primary interest is heart-driven. He's there to spread the word and do God's work. But do you think because of what he's saying to this point that there was some, I don't want to use too strong a word, but if they had been doing this, supporting other people or paying other people and not wanting to support Paul, do you think there might have been a little bit of animus or spite or hard feelings toward him, even though he established the church? Why should we pay you? We support this other guy, but hey, why should we support you type? Verse 14 says, even so hath the Lord ordained that they which preach the gospel should live of the gospel. Now, to me, this just puts, going along with Brother Klotz and Romans, this just puts a nail in it right here. Even so hath the Lord ordained that they which preach the gospel should live by the gospel. Now, what does that mean? You not only do what you say, you set the example, but if you're going to live by it, doesn't that mean that you are supported by it? You're supported and maintained by it. Verse 15, but I have used none of these things, neither have I written these things, that it should be done unto me, for it were better for me to die than that any man should make my glorying vain. In other words, as we had said earlier, Paul was not in it for the money. Paul worked at his trade, supported himself. I'm sure he ate a meal or two off of them, but he was self-sufficient. And he said here that the most important thing is spreading the gospel. A lot of times, preachers, especially today, they get paid such an exorbitant amount that isn't that a way to glorify the speaker instead of glorifying the message? Yes, no? Right. And there are those, if you really, and I'm not wanting to pick on any one person or any one group, but if you look at, we can take the group of televangelists to start with, and then we can work our way down to some of the better known evangelists, regardless of their particular faith. look at how they live, the money that they have made, and are they that much better preacher? Do they, that they should live that lifestyle?
People flocking to them for their word, or they flocking to them so they might see that personality. Oh, I gotta get near that person because he's big.
If they were truly like Paul, they would live a normal, average life and not live in a mansion, and they would be putting money out to support the indigent and those that were in need more than just accumulating. Brother Henderson, you look like you're dying to say something.
Well, you know, these super charismatic preachers with the Italian suits and the Rolex and, watches, and they don't hide it. They're out front with it. But how many, what we call fire and brimstone preachers actually drive all this, live in these huge houses, drive these flying the jets? It's the message. A lot of these preachers these days with the big, bank account, God loves you all, true. But they never say anything about, but the caveat of this is what you guys are doing. They never come. They say, you're all welcome here, God loves you all. And then they don't get to the punchline. I call it the punchline. By the way, guys, you're not quite doing what you're doing. And they love it. They eat that up. It's like, okay, I can do what I'm doing. Go to church. I feel great. I walk out of there. They tell me I'm a great guy. I walk out. I'm good. That's why they got all that money. Yeah.
Well, this is in a sermon that I've got sitting over in the recesses, but what you said about the fire and brimstone, one of the better known evangelists of the early 1900s, 1910s and 20s was a fellow by the name of Billy Sunday. He was known as a fire and brimstone preacher. And one day he was being chastised a little bit, and some people were saying, you need to tone it down just a little bit. Stop offending people. Stop rubbing the cat's fur the wrong way. His one-line response was, I'm not changing my preaching. Let the cat turn around. Which goes right back to what you said. I don't agree with a lot of his beliefs, but he was preaching the word, and if it offended somebody, he wasn't being offensive. What were they being offended about? Doing the wrong thing and being told about it. So he's not changing. Let them get their life straight. So. Yeah. I don't recall that, but I'm getting old too, so. But yes, sir. Yeah, their kingdom literally come tumbling down around them, didn't it? But Paul here he was very emphatic there that in verse 15 that he is not, he's not asking for the money, but preachers should be supported. But the main thing is that they preach in the name of God for God's glory and not for personal glory. Verse 16 through 18 go together. It says, for though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of, for necessity is laid upon me. Yea, woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel. For I do this thing willingly. I have a reward. But if against my will, a dispensation of the gospel is committed unto me. What is my reward then? Verily, that when I preach the gospel, I may make the gospel of Christ without charge, that I abuse not my power in the gospel, or without exercise, that he can exercise without the power or the right there. But his reward is the same as our reward. If we live a righteous life and do what we're supposed to, we all have that same reward. We're going to heaven. But what he, in essence, what he really says here, if he's doing it for the money, he's doing it for the wrong reason. If he does it for the right reason, he's going to have the reward that he wants, heaven. But at the same time, he's doing it without charge, meaning that he's going to do it whether he gets money or not, just like the preachers that I referenced having meetings. They're going to come and do it with no charge. But wouldn't we be horrible people, especially horrible Christians, if some guy came in and spent 4 days here in a gospel meeting and all we did was feed him when he was here and give him gas money to get home? What would you think of somebody that did that? Now, back in the early days, back in the 1800s, when they was riding around on horseback and the traveling preachers and all, that's about all they could expect, because that's all people had. But in today's age, we need to think about doing things a little bit better. Raccoon John Smith, I'd mentioned him Wednesday night. There was times when Raccoon John Smith would ride his mule or horse, pull up to his house, hand down his dirty clothes, pick up clean clothes that his wife had prepared for him, and strike out again. I can't think of his name right now, but one of the earlier preachers around that time in the mid-1800s in Arkansas would walk 20 miles each way to have a meeting at a meeting house. How many preachers today are dedicated enough that they would do a 40-mile trip on foot to preach? I believe that was it, Joe Blue. Oh, you never met him personally?
It's this Timothy 3 when it comes to characteristics of elders and deacons, we call them bishops here. It says that the bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apathy, not given to wine or striker, not greedy or filthy lucre, but patient, not a broken, not covetous. So I think that's kind of what Paul is trying to get through to them.
Right.
Because you're trying to teach Timothy this here, but Paul is also trying to convey a similar point.
He is. He's saying he's not doing it for the money, and he's not doing it for the glory. He's when Andrew and I were in the Philippines, when they would have a gospel meeting there, people would come from miles and miles around because there wasn't many churches in the area. Matter of fact, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think where we were, that was the only Church of Christ in a 100-mile radius. And people would bus in, and it would be up to the members of the congregation to put those people in their homes and feed them. You would sign up, I'll take care of 2, or I'll take care of 3. And for the week that they were there at the meeting, you had house guests that you were to provide a place to sleep and food to eat. Now, they didn't want much, but they didn't, over in the Philippines, they didn't have much. So, and at the church, building, they would have the noon meal where people would bring stuff in and feed them. So you was only required to take care of them one meal, well, two meals, breakfast and an evening meal. But and used to in the United States, when a preacher went on a mission or on a gospel meeting, they wasn't put up in motels. They housed with family members, with congregants. I know when I was in Harding College, at Harding College, a group would go out every Sunday off into some distant hill country church and they'd handle all the services. No money involved. And it gave those that were in school to be preachers, it gave them some experience. Then the rest of us would go along to do the rest of the things, take care of the Lord's table, pray, etc., lead sing. I recall one event that I went to. It's probably the worst feeling I ever had, and at the same time, the best feeling I ever had. Because after we went there, this one couple wanted us to go home with them and eat, and there was 4 of us guys. And you know how college guys used to eat, or still eat. We were thankful to be with the folks, and the best part of it is how gracious they were and what they wanted to do for us. But I literally felt like every bite of food that I was eating, I was taking food out of their mouth. They were that poor. I'd much rather have not eaten anything and left it to them, but at the same time, I would have insulted them if I had not taken to their hospitality. So
There's a lot of schools out there that give a degree to people who want to become pastors, you know. Like in the secular schools,
yeah.
they say that they become a pastor when they get a degree or something.
Well, right now with the internet, you can go online and pay so much money and get your little piece of paper that says you're a ordained whatever.
Then you know, church somewhere and start making money.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Starting with verse 20, he changes just a little bit and says, "Unto the Jews I became a Jew as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. To them that are under the law as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law. To them that are without law as without law, being not without law to God, but under the law to Christ, that I might gain them that they are without law. To the weak became I as weak, that I might gain the weak. I am made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some." What, in essence, if we go along with my comments about my college days there and this, when we went into the backwoods of Arkansas, we didn't pretend to be something high and mighty from the city. Of course, I couldn't because I wasn't a city guy. I fit right in with them up in the hills. But you don't try to be something you're not with people. You try to match what they're doing so that you can encourage them and edify them and not put them down in any way. Again, when Andrew and I were in the Philippines, we didn't have to worry about that because the particular week that those 3 guys came in to stay with us, I had just gotten my military paycheck. We got paid twice a month. We had paid all our bills and got our food that we were going to eat, and we had $5 left to last 2 weeks with 3 house guests coming for a week. So we couldn't be pretentious or be something that we weren't. Matter of fact, after the first meal, the fellows in as broken English as good as they could tell Andrea would, "You just put the food there, we'll fix it." They didn't like the way she cooked rice. but we gave them what they needed, and they took care of them best we could. And then verse 23 says, "And this I do for the gospel's sake, that I might be partaker thereof with you." And to me, I think that is the key verse. That is the most important verse. Every one of us here today should be here for one reason and one reason only. And I think that is right along here. I do it for the gospel's sake, that I might be a partaker with you. If we're not here wanting to go to heaven and be with others like us, we're here for the wrong reason, aren't we?
Small word as, doesn't say that's why I continue.
No.
Similar to it, so that I can have the best advantage to accomplish the gospel.
Right. As, like, compared to, yeah. Verse 24, "Know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize? So run that ye may obtain. And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. I therefore so run, not as uncertainly, so fight I, not as one that beateth the air." And then look at verse 27. "But I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway." Oh, how important that verse is. He's saying if you're going to preach it, you got to live it. He doesn't want to put something out to somebody and have them require something of them that he's not doing himself. Pardon? Don't be a hypocrite. And he said, I keep my body, well, in essence, he's keeping his body under subjection, that he has to control himself so that he can do what's right. And as he's doing this, he's not going to be that hypocrite.
For him, as an apostle, to say, "Oh yeah, he needs to come with more money." That would be easy for him to do because of his position.
Yeah. How many of you have ever worked? How many of you have ever worked for a boss that says, "Do as I say, not as I do"? Huh?
And at the same time, I mean, I've had bosses that get right in there and work with you, and I've always, that's always better. They're like, hey, they're willing to do the same thing I am, and that's what I'm about.
Yeah.
How long would one have to train and what extent they must look at this type of test and the people all they some spiritual things. I think it was a lifelong process.
What Brother Klontz mentioned there is very, very interesting. If you didn't hear it, he said, look how long these people train for the Olympics and what they have to go through, and comparing it to us, we need to do the same thing. But if you've ever noticed an Olympian or even college athlete in gymnastics, for instance, when they are waiting to do their routine, what do you see them doing? They are mentally going through it, even though they have practiced it before they got there 1,000 times, they are still mentally preparing for that next 30 seconds. They never stop until it's over. And I think we could take a lesson from that too. We don't stop till it's over. We go right along with that. Luke's just rung the bell, not rung the bell, but counted, and I'll get ready to ring the bell. Brother Golden? Right. Right. Absolutely. Thank y'all so much for your attention and your comments.